We lost him. Here at MSU, questions, comments? No, we'll pass. Second.
I just wanted to mention that as far as Luke's going with the Change to Win and all that stuff, this was really unprecedented that so many unions came together with a common goal. In the past, it's been, Teamsters did one thing, UAW did something else, SEIU did something. And this time we had a real clear vision, and Luke was part of that. And having that vision really helped us focus and know the member-to-member would work, that we had the information at our fingertips. And that's something that we really need to maintain for all future elections.
I'd have to agree. There were no real political problems amongst our leadership at the table, which, my brothers and sisters in the room is kind of unprecedented as far as organized labor goes. Everybody knew what that prize was, and the eyes were on it all the time. When something came up, it was immediately, how can we get over this, and how can we keep talking to members? And that was the goal, and we did it right through November 4th.
Amy, how did that look from the Obama campaign, the varied unions in her comment?
We thought it was terrific. Now, we obviously respected the two labor federations and then the independent unions within the federations, but it was nice to see everyone operating on the same page, and which is what collective action is supposed to be like, everyone operating together for a greater good. So we were thrilled. We worked with folks as they chose to be worked with, but we were very happy that the labor movement came out in force. And I think it's a good sign for future activities, 2010 and beyond, that everyone was able to keep their eyes on the prize and operate with the same goals.
Well, it sounds like part of it was structural and organizational, but how much of it was inspired by, say, loathing of George Bush? No, I'm serious. I mean, how much of it was driven when you talk? I've heard the word "I" on the prize used here a couple of times. I mean, was the prize bigger this time?
It was a much bigger incentive this time because everybody in Michigan knows that our jobs are on the line. Right. The economy did that, and George Bush's war did that. Yeah.
Everyone knew George Bush was gone. It's his policies that we want to redo. We want to get rid of the unfair trade agreements, renegotiate those, and that's a goal everyone saw and everyone knew that we had to win to achieve.
If I could also just
Go ahead.
mention something about that, which is this election seemed a lot more about being for someone than being against someone. And I think all of us saw what an election was like about being against someone, which is you don't quite make it to the goal line. This time there were so many people who wanted to be for Barack Obama. I think that also created a different dynamic, and not just in terms of the work on the ground, but the excitement in terms of events and when he and other members and the other members of the ticket were in town. I don't know about a lot of people, but I haven't seen very many rallies with 35,000 people at it with 2 days' notice, 3 days' notice. There were a lot of people who wanted to believe and wanted to be a part of something, and I think that goes way beyond people wanting to be against something, and it also gives me hope, pardon the pun, for being able to use this for future activity and for a successful presidency.
Question here.
I was going to say, do you think that part of the message, Luke, I know your campaign was echoed around about finding the issues that resonated with everyone. Do you think that really helped? People gave something to people to talk to their neighbors about and to their family members?
As folks went to the doors in different parts of the state, you'd get a member that said, I don't know if I can vote for a black guy. Well, how's your 401k doing today? Did you look at it? And that's a way open to the door to say that this is so much more about race, and we're all better than that. This is about our pocketbooks and your family, and you need to just get over it. If you want the same, John McCain will do that for you, and nobody wanted that.
I think, and I know in our union, just by the mere fact that you gave us tools that we could talk to people, because it's uncomfortable. A lot of people don't want to have those family discussions. But I think the tools were there. It was really helpful to a lot of people.
Yes.
That's me.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to say about Lansing, and they talked about the 18 to 29-year-olds and the increases that the AFL-CIO constituency groups, which is AFL Randolph, LACLA, Clue, and Paul, were very instrumental in helping turn out that 18 to 29-year-old vote. And I thought that that was very crucial for Lansing because they helped with that age group. They targeted that age group. So I wanted to give kudos to those groups.
How did they target them?
Speaker asked you, do you want to say?
How did they target them?
They would go out into the neighborhoods. We did at the churches, the schools. We did schools,
University. Churches.
churches,
Yeah.
grocery stores.
Okay.
Well, there certainly was a youth movement. I saw it in my own household. I tell the story that I have a 23-year-old and a 21-year-old, and the 23-year-old, neither of them had any interest in politics whatsoever. I mean, their dad's a political writer. I thought maybe it's just an act of rebellion, but I mean, the one, the one is an artist. The other thinks the party is what you go to on Friday night. And they both went to great pains to make sure they were registered to vote this year. And the one who's living in Chicago, my oldest daughter, had to vote by absentee ballot here. She had to come back here and go to the city clerk to get an absentee ballot, show up in person. I mean, this is a kid who never voted before, who showed no interest in politics. So a lot of it was she was in Grant Park that night, by the way, on election night. And she told me, it was just, she says it was like this big Lollapalooza. I mean, it was a big party, mainly, for a lot of the young people. She says it wasn't until the next day that she realized what she'd been to. That she'd realized, what she'd been to. But I think a lot of it was sort of peer-induced, too, because she was around people like her boyfriend who talked a lot about politics. I mean, in Chicago, there was what can I say? I mean, it was Obama land, and so she was around that. But the younger, my 21-year-old too, seemed to be swept up in this sort of cultish kind of pop star phenomenon of the Barack Obama campaign. So, I mean, I said the youth turnout was really huge. Well, others say proportionately it wasn't much bigger than in the past because so many more people turned out. But I say, I don't know what the polls say. I got a poll in my own family, and it went way up that day.
Is there any other questions in Detroit? Marquette? Okay, another East Lansing question.
I would like to address this to Mr. Kristoff in particular. One of the things that Obama had said was he wanted to run a campaign that was not so negative, and I think overall we've seen a lot less of the Karl Rove-like tactics, and in this election overall, although of course it's never perfectly clean, I wonder, do you think there's any chance that will continue, or do you think this is just a phenomenon for this year?
Well, they did it because it worked for them. If they had, I think that if they had found that really negative, if they needed to do negative campaigning, that they probably would have. But I think they found that taking the high road, and I think generally you can say that the Obama campaign took the high road, that it seemed to work for them, and whatever works. I mean, we've been saying for years and years, people are turned off by negative campaigning. It's disgusting. It's perverting politics. But the fact is, in most cases, it works. In many cases, anyway, it works. There's always the problem or the risk of backlash. Actually, I think you saw that in the McCain campaign. I mean, when the McCain campaign turned negative, given who John McCain was and who he stood for so many people, when that campaign turned negative, there was this instant repulsion from much of the public toward it. That was interesting to watch because you don't always see that. We talk about it theoretically, the backlash of negative campaigning. This year, you got to see it. I mean, it unfolded right before our eyes, So, I mean, campaigns do whatever they think they're going to work. But, one of the more interesting comments I saw was in 60 Minutes. They interviewed Obama's campaign brain trust the day after the election. I don't know how many of you saw that. And I don't know if it was Plouffe or David Axelrod who said, the most telling thing was that in all of that how many months was it? It was 18 months, 14 months, however long the campaign, to us it seems forever. For all of that time, they never saw Barack Obama lose it. You know? Now, I mean, I take him at face value for that. I guess all of us having seen him, you can kind of believe it. But I thought that was a remarkable statement. I mean, you could just say nothing about it. I mean, somebody who has a temper, or loses their, you don't have to say anything about it. But they made a point of saying that he never saw him lose it. It was clear, certainly in hindsight, that, I mean, they had a game plan and they stuck with it, and that plan didn't include going negative, and for their, they found they didn't have to. That's a long answer to your question. Will we see it again? Will we see negative campaigning again? Of course we will. Yes, we'll see negative campaigning again. It depends on the candidate. I mean, well, before this session ends, I've got to ask the question I said I was going to ask. What was it with Cliff Taylor? What happened there? Somebody tell me, please. Why there was that kind of outpouring against?
Well, people dislike lawyers, and that's why in my work in the labor movement, I hid that I was one. I am one. And so there's part of that. Second part is that, it was known that he wasn't a font of judicial openness. I mean, he was an ideologue when he and his wife were involved in the Eagle administration, and the same thing with his colleagues on the court. And I think it was a case of, it was the great slogan of all the way, Hathaway. I mean, don't forget the nonpartisan portion of the ballot. Labor pushed that significantly, and obviously trial lawyers did. I think it was a combination of events. And lastly, arguably the falling asleep at the bench was a cheap shot, but Granholm used the Pat Benatar song, "Hit Me With Your Best Shot," the first campaign, and that was the best shot against the guy. And as you said yourself, he never responded.
Go ahead.
I think I'd add, I wouldn't discount, was it Weaver? She added a lot to that campaign, wasn't it? Justice Weaver? The female justice who is of the same party, and she took shots at him starting way back, probably a year or more ago. And she brought, I think, for a lot of people, she brought it up to a level of recognition.
So the public,
for people where
public read that stuff.
They did read it, I think, and sometimes it was spectacular. It ended up on the front page of a paper, or it was on the TV, and I think it just raised their consciousness to the level that she portrayed this guy as the bad guy, and it was pretty easy. The other stuff followed.
If anybody else has other answers, I'm sure you can send Chris an email and schedule an interview, and you can appear in the Free Press at some point here about that topic. I'd like to thank these three panelists very much. And we're going to take a 8-9 minute break, and then we'll be back here for our third and final panel. Thank you.